everyone. Welcome back to the podcast In the Way of Music Ground Level. We have a special guest today, Mr. Gary Holland. Gary, thanks for coming to the podcast, buddy. Appreciate you being here.
Very pleased to be here.
So, if you've watched any of the podcast or you kind of looked around a little bit, you see that, I ask the same set of questions to everybody that comes in. The questions are really about, who are you, where you been, what's your thoughts, some of the things you may be experiencing as a musician, and maybe offering a little advice to other folks. So, unless you've got something you want to talk about specifically, something going on that you want to...
No, not particularly.
All right, so
I was just glad that, coming in...
Yeah?
That the roads were paved.
Yeah.
Because I don't exactly drive a four-wheel drive.
Well, there is an old saying that if you come back here and see us, we meant to. So,
right.
kind of back up in the woods, ain't it?
Right.
But that's a good thing. All right, well, listen, if you're ready, I'm just going to dive right off in these questions.
Sure.
You ready?
Sure.
Okay. Well, and some of them are pretty, some of them just easy enough, but some of them it'll make you think a little bit. But so when did you start playing music? How long have you been in this?
Well, it's funny because before I ever even knew what a musician was, I was at my grandmother's house. I was 5 years old, and I was sitting on the floor playing with my toys, and the radio was playing in the background. Nobody else was in the room. It was just me, and a Beatles song came on, and the song was "I Want to Hold Your Hand."
Uh-oh.
And when I heard that song, because, up until then, it was all kind of, one station played everything, right? So you could hear Hank Williams, or Hank Snow, or Everly Brothers.
Whatever they were pushing.
Yeah, whatever happened to be on, right? So it was very odd, and all of a sudden, like the Beatles, and I heard that song, and boy, that got my attention. And it was just an epiphany, I just said, I'm not sure what that is, but I have
like
to do that. I have to find out what that is, and I have to do that.
You didn't start beating on the toys or nothing, did that say?
I don't think I did at that moment, but I really had to think about it. So I hammered my parents for the next 4 years that, I want drums. I need drums.
Much to their chagrin.
Oh, God. And I'm sure, that they probably thought, well, this too shall pass.
Yeah, right.
So they kind of ignored me for 4 years about that. And then after 4 years, and I hadn't let up, and then after dinner one night, and my father was opening the mail, and from that day, and there was a letter from the school that said, if you'd like your son or daughter to participate in the school music program, please indicate desired instrument below. Right. So my parents said, well, do you want to, do this? And I think they already knew the answer, right? So I said, yes. And they said, okay, what instrument do you want to play? I mean, they didn't even finish getting the sentence out of their mouth.
Trombone, cornet, nothing came out.
Yeah. So, so they got me a snare drum,
okay,
and it was like through the school music program, and then at that point I started beating on everything,
right.
Pots and pans and whatever, with
whatever making noise.
And, yep, I started beating on everything because I was really excited I was going to do that. So yeah, I was 9 when I finally got to start, and then. Believe it or not, I was a Boy Scout. So when I was off at a camp out, weekend camp out, and I came home, and there was a drum kit that I'd been looking at. It was a cheap Japanese kit, and that I'd been pricing. I was just like looking at everything under the sun.
How many bottles can you carry down to get?
Right. I mean. To try to afford that, I was cutting grass, mowing the neighbors' yards, and.
So how long ago was that?
I was probably 12 when that happened.
So, is that 50 years ago? Is that?
Yeah,
somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think it was probably like 1971.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right.
About 71.
That's fair enough. So, one of my next questions is what influenced you? But and what's interesting is, a lot of people say, well, my dad played guitar, my mom sang in the church, or what, that kind of thing. But the fact, the way that you heard it on the radio like that, and it just immediately stuck with you, I would imagine that was one of your biggest influences. And then sounds like the band thing too. So, anything else influenced you to?
Well, my parents weren't really musically inclined.
Okay.
And my sister wasn't. My sister played flute, in like elementary school band or whatever,
Right.
but that never went anywhere. Okay. And then, and my mother always had an organ, and she kind of played around with it, but she wasn't really that great. And my dad played the stereo.
We're gonna write you up as your influence was the Beatles.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely was. And I have a Beatles story.
Okay.
So one night, and this would have been probably 1981. I was in Hollywood, and the party was always in the parking lot between the Rainbow and the Roxy. So the Rainbow Bar and Grill, and then the Roxy Theater, and then there was a parking lot, and the party would be in the parking lot. So I was in the parking lot with some friends, and then somebody said, "Hey, look over there! Isn't that Ringo Starr?"
Oh no!
And I was like, "Wow, that's Ringo Starr. He's just standing there by himself. He had a pinstripe suit with just an open, a shirt with no tie, and he's standing there with his hands in his pockets." Probably waiting for his car,
right?
Just standing there by himself. And so just about that time, there was this long-haired guy that walked up to him and said, "Hey, Ringo," and he stuck his hand out. He was going to shake his hand, and Ringo never took his hands out of his pockets. He just looked at the guy and said, "I don't want to shake your bloody hand." And the guy just like, "Oh, okay."
Well, there you go.
Turned around and walked away, And I mean, I can't really blame him, I guess. I mean, when you're a Beatle.
Probably at that stage in the game, I would imagine so. That's probably getting pretty wild for them.
Yeah.
All right, so who do you know that really influences this music industry, or somebody that's influenced it that stands out in your mind?
Who really influences it? Like today? I don't know about today. And maybe... like I was part of a scene in the 80s, right? So there were people who came up and kind of directed the scene as it was, evolving.
Right.
And some of those people were the last people you would think of. I was invited to join Motley Crue twice by Nicky and Mick.
Okay.
And they were a horrible, horrible band, zero talent, and I aligned myself with people who could play their instruments and sing and write songs and owned gear. I mean, this was like probably 1980 or 81 maybe. It was really early on in their career. Mm-hmm. And I never imagined that anything would ever happen for them. And they were the biggest joke in Hollywood. Nobody really thought that they were going to do anything. I was convinced that they would never pop. I mean, nothing would ever happen for them. Honestly, you could walk into a laundromat in Willis and find 4 people with more musical talent than those guys. And I know because I taught Tommy for 3 years.
Okay, all right.
So, I said no. I wasn't going to join that group. But as it turns out, Nicky, the bass player, ends up being, some pretty big, successful, influential person in the industry. And, I don't really know him anymore.
But that was somebody back then that really influenced things for you and helped you move along? Or,
no, he never helped me. No.
He didn't help you? Okay, but you was watching him do his thing.
Yeah, I mean, we were in direct competition with those guys.
Okay.
And in fact, my manager was arranging a photo shoot with Tommy and I, because we both drove Corvettes. And so he was going to arrange this photo. It never happened, but the photo was going to be our Corvettes were backed up to each other, and then we'd be standing back to back with dueling pistols. I mean, that's like, because we were neck and neck at that time.
Wow, that's
So-
a pretty good picture.
Yeah, it would have been a great photo.
You know, I asked the influencer question because at this stage of the game in the music industry as a whole, there are many influencers out there. There are people that influence the media marketing side of it. There's people that are still doing, you know, the big band stuff. There's just so many people that they're striving for their piece and their piece of pie, and they're trying to make things happen, and they're constantly at work. And so the question is really, do you know somebody that's doing that, or is that somebody that's you know, that you can speak to, that's helped out, or you've seen that? So it's not everybody has the same question, you know.
Yeah, and to be
Same
sure,
answer, I'm sorry.
Those people, they have a season, right? So
Yeah,
when they come onto the scene, and then when they become irrelevant, you know, there's a season. And I think most of the people that I knew, and I probably fall in that category too, where we had a season where we were really, you know, known commodities, to, you know, where all of a sudden we weren't. But that doesn't mean that you can't reinvent yourself at a later point in time.
Sure.
You know, and have some sort of a resurgence in commercial success.
Fair enough. All right. Well, moving on to the next question. What do you consider your contributions to the music industry? I mean, I know being a drummer, but I've, you know, looking at your profiles, looking at your YouTube channels, and which folks you need to go out here and check your spell out. But what do you feel like is your biggest contribution to the music industry?
Boy, that's a double-edged sword.
Isn't it, though?
Because, I mean, there's sometimes, you know, I think when you say your contributions, like, what wouldn't exist had you not shown up?
Right.
You know, or what would exist if you
Or
had
what are
not
you
shown
currently doing that you feel like is really helping people or your situation or others out? I mean, you know, contribution can be then or it can be now too. So,
Well, like a lot of people, when I was coming up, I was under the impression that all you had to do was just, you know, work on your musicianship, you know, work on your
keep it in time and keep it in tune.
work on your technical proficiency, and then the rest will take care of itself. That's not true. You know, you have to, I mean, all those things are important, but if you don't take care of the business side of things, you know, that's the business side is the part that allows you to continue to do it.
Right.
Right. So if you don't take care of the business side and there's no revenue coming in, then you're going to end up having to do something else, and then you can't do music full time, or maybe not even part time.
Right.
I had a person in my life years ago, and she was a business professional. You know, she had a company that did window fronts, I guess, you know, for like Neiman Marcus and, you know, all these Beverly Hills stores up and down Wilshire, all these really high-end stores. And she would do all the visual design in the windows, you know, for like Christmas season or what, you know, whatever happened to be going at that.
A lot of graphics.
Right. And so she was always about, you know, revenue, like keeping revenue coming in. And so when I would talk to her about this one thing I was doing, let's say somebody asked me, hey, you know, will you come in the studio and help me out with some vocals or help me out with some drums or both or something? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. I just go in and do it, you know, and I wouldn't, the subject of money would never come up, you know, and I wouldn't push it. I was uncomfortable pushing it.
Right.
And so I just wanted to add to my catalog, like any demos or anything that I could. You know, I didn't think about that I was, you know,
just the associations, having the associations was very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, she kind of took me by the lapels and said, hey, listen, Buster, you know, if you do it for nothing, that's what it's worth. Nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and if you weren't good enough, they wouldn't ask you to be on their project or their demo or whatever. You're representing them.
Yes.
And so you deserve to be compensated for your time. Yeah. And so she really drilled me about that. And So from that moment forward, I came up with a fee schedule and said, okay, if they want me to go in and do a demo and they want me to sing, then it's going to be this much per song with this song minimum. If you want me to drum, it's going to be this much. If it's a demo, if you have a budget, then it has a separate schedule over here. And so when people would ask me, I would just tell them, okay, do you have a budget?
Yeah.
And then we'd get on that subject. And if they didn't have a budget and they couldn't pay, and it was not a pro situation, then I just sort of dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you can't afford
so
me.
you found you understood at that time, and you found out that business and music come together, and then you had to do something about it, and so you made those arrangements and those changes.
Yeah, I kind of was learning by the seat of my pants.
Cause, don't we all?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have anybody to show me that side of it.
Right.
And so when I, for lack of a better word, was taken advantage of, in the business side of things, to the tune of a lot of money. Let's just say hundreds of thousands. That's probably pretty conservative. So then I put together a program called The Road Taken, which was a play off the Robert Frost poem, The Road Not Taken. And I would go out to music schools, elementary schools, high schools, colleges, universities, whoever would have me come in.
Okay.
And it was like I could customize it. It would just be me talking. I could come in with a band. It could be 2 hours. It could be 40 minutes, whatever you wanted. And I would talk about the industry, and I would lecture about the business of music and entertainment.
Well, look at there. That's what we're talking about right there.
So then I ended up trying to show kids or other, young adults, anybody that had aspirations of being a professional entertainer, like, you don't want to ignore this part of it.
Okay.
Right. So then
that's awesome.
So I would give them the tools they needed so that, because a lot of I've met a lot of people who were thinking about it the same way I did. Right. So they just thought, hey, all I need to do is just be a master musician and the rest is going to handle itself. That's not true. And I would tell them, musicianship does not in and of itself create commerce.
No, it don't.
Musicians die broke. Entertainers buy homes in Malibu. So you want to be an entertainer. Is it entertaining?
Well, I love what you what you just said about what you did with the kids and the contribution that you put out there for those, because that's giving back, and there's
that's my revenge, for having been taken advantage of. Is I'm going to prevent somebody else from being taken advantage of, because now I know all the ins and outs. I write my own contracts.
I haven't said it in this podcast, but I've said it in others. But you just echoed some things that I've been saying all along, that the reason for these podcasts, the things that we're trying to do at this table and moving forward is just some of that right there. I guess in my mind, there's a lack of consistency in this industry, this music industry, especially on the local scene, right? So I feel like that there is a way that through all of the interviews and all of the information and the things that are shared, that we can kind of, I guess we'll say, level the playing field. So, I'm with you in what you did and why you did it. So let's get on to the next question here. Now I know this question about collaboration, and I know that you've been a band member and a drummer. Being the drummer, you're one of the more important one, keeping things together. But looking ahead, let's talk about looking ahead and collaborating. Is there other things that you're looking at doing or collaborating with other bands or other people for music? What is it that you're looking ahead for collaboration?
Yeah, I have to collaborate, right? As a drummer,
that's what
right?
I mean, yeah.
Or as a singer, I have to collaborate. I'm not really good at writing a song by myself. Okay. I have to have somebody to collaborate with, because I may have an idea, but I get stuck at some point, and then I need somebody to kind of push me over that hump. Or it's like getting to a fork in the road and you can't see what's around either corner.
Right.
So I need somebody to go, hey, let's go in that direction, right? And then when I get past that direction, then it just opens up a whole other world of ideas.
Right. The creativity starts to flow.
Right. Yeah. So okay. I'm more of a collaborator than a solo songwriter.
So is that something you're thinking moving ahead? Is following
Sure,
into the
I would
songwriting
always
things?
love to collaborate with anybody, and I have collaborated with a lot of people,
Okay.
and some very unlikely people.
You know, collaboration is not for everybody, you know, and most people don't really have a, you know, problem with collaborating with somebody else that says, you know, well, let's hook up and let's do this project or to whatever level. But there are some people, you know, I want my guitar or I want my toys and I'm going to go play with them, you know, and that's okay. It just depends on who you are and, you know, where your mindset is.
And some people do not need my help.
Right.
Right. Or hindrance.
All right. So this is probably going to be a very interesting question for a fellow like yourself. This is a Gary thing straight up. Biggest success or biggest missed opportunity in your lifetime that speaks to your heart?
Well, my biggest success, and this is probably not the answer you were looking for, but I would say my children are my biggest success, right? So that's...
it's your heart, brother. You tell me what's on your mind.
I couldn't have asked. I mean, I kind of feel like I struck pay dirt. I think that every kid needs to feel like they struck pay dirt in the parent department. Right. So no matter what differences I've ever had with the mother, I never allowed that to spill over onto, you know, I never allowed my children to disrespect their mother.
Yeah, right.
So, and they all turned out. I couldn't be happier with the way they all turned out. So that's, you know, hands down my greatest success.
Brian Keith, a friend of mine, he had come in on a previous podcast.
From Family Affair?
No, not that Brian Keith, not that Brian Keith. Longtime friend of mine. You know, and we kind of had that same conversation because, you know, being in the music and family, there's always that you got to figure some things out. So the fact that you feel like your family is your greatest success, and bless your heart. I mean, that's as good a answer as I'm ever going to ask for. So don't worry about it. How about this? What is your funniest or saddest story when it comes to music?
I got a couple of funny ones. I mean, well, they're funny to me. You may not find them funny.
Well, then let's hear this.
Okay. So I was in a band called Britain, and this was a band that I had kind of helped put together after Great White. So I had left Great White, and I needed a project, so I found this band called Romeo, and then there was some really good things about the band, but there were some not so good things, and so I kind of handpicked. I go, that guy's got to go, and that guy's got to go, right? And this guy can stay. And we brought other people in, and they said, hey, I know somebody. I'm like, yeah, bring him. And so then we changed the name and changed all the songs, and we put out an album, and it turned out really good. Okay, so then we had these three guys that used to be our crew, and we were somewhere in the Deep South, and it was an off night. We weren't gigging that night. You know, we probably came into town early, and the show was the following night. So our three crew guys went, and these were all like really big guys, and they went into this House of Pancakes, of all places, and they were having an all-you-could-eat fried chicken.
And the big boys were having a good time.
Right, and so it was all you could eat for this, you know, really paltry price, and they said, okay, we're going to eat. And these guys could eat, right? So they sat around this table, and they just kept ordering chicken, and ordering chicken, and ordering chicken. And then finally, one of the guys told me, he goes, we had the bones lined up all the way around the outside of the table, like in a serpentine, you know, fashion. And then there were 63 bones, you know, they had eaten, you know,
that's a lot of chicken.
Of drumsticks, yeah. And then all of a sudden,
that's 32 chickens.
The kitchen door flies open, and this chef, you know, in his white suit with this hat that did this kind of thing, he steps out into the dining room and he says, "Who the hell's eating all this chicken?" And then the manager walks up to their table and says, "Okay, guys, you know, you made your point. You know, if you leave now, you don't have to pay." And he said, "Honestly, Gary, we couldn't have eaten another thing."
Good thing they didn't have a couple cows out back, huh?
Oh man! So yeah, there's a couple of funny things.
All right. Well, yeah, that would definitely be a sight to see. All right. So this question here, I asked this question. This isn't to name anybody or any venue or establishment, but it's kind of one of those questions that if, just like, man, I just wish things were different, and or it could be different, or it should have been different, or going ahead. It's whatever's on your mind. But what upsets you about this music industry?
It's the way that, and I get it. I understand it. I may not agree with it, but I understand it. So it's like every time there's some unique artist who comes out, and then they have like a multi-million selling album, or a Grammy-winning breakout performance, or it's a new group, or it might not even be a new group. It's just somebody who has maybe been out there for a while, and then they put out a single. Let's say Michael Jackson.
Okay.
And so Michael Jackson was around for a very long time. Before he broke big with Thriller. And I'm just using that as one example. There's a lot of different people.
Right.
Or maybe Hootie and the Blowfish. Right. It might be another one where you had this new band that comes out, and they have a unique, albeit simple, sound. And then as soon as they have a raging success with that, then all of these copycats, like cheap knockoffs, come out.
Want to get in on the flow.
Right. And it's not. I can't really blame the artists. I mean, yes, everybody sees someone have success, they want to have some of that success too, right? So it's not just the musicians. A lot of times, it's the producers, or it's the label people, the A&R people, and so it's like, oh, stop the presses. We gotta follow this trend.
Well, you could go all the way back between Elvis and Conway Twitty, because if you look back in the early days, right? There you go. So I get, exactly that.
So everything gets funneled down into this lowest common denominator,
right? Where
like they try to figure out what they're doing that's the big selling point. So they just keep whittling it away until they try to find that formula. Like it might just be 3 really stupid things. Like it could be the way the songs are written. Okay, verse, chorus, pre-chorus, chorus, lead solo, bridge, chorus out.
Right.
And then that all the songs are written like that, afterwards. That, and then it's like, yeah, but okay, hold on. They've got spandex pants, and then they've got a leather jacket with fringe on it too. So we need to do that. Wait a minute. What's that thing they're doing with their hair? We need to do that thing. Wait a minute. They got all girls in the band, and they got a guy singer, and he's got a deep voice. So we have to get we have to put a band together with all girls, and then a male singer with a deep voice.
Copycat.
Right. And so it's just boiling it down to the lowest common denominator. I had done background vocals for Ozzy Osbourne, and I was waiting for the album to come out. The stuff that I did, and it was supposed to be coming out on the very next record. And that was just about the time that grunge hit. Mm-hmm. So they were in the mix down phase of the album. All the tracks have been recorded, and then the label called the producer and said, "Stop everything. We need to make this album sound like grunge."
Oh no!
Right, and Michael Wagner, the producer, said, "It doesn't work like that."
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it just doesn't. So they wanted him to stop on a dime and make change for a quarter, and it just doesn't work like that.
I get it. Wow, that would be a pretty good hit there. Huh. All right, so as musicians and being in the music industry, we all face organizations. Like I said, I generally will throw out the the easy hits: BMI, ASCAP, CSAC. You have, Country Music Association, Texas Country Music Association. You've got, there's so many associations out there. Which ones have you been involved with in your career? And are there ones that you think that people should live? And I know the songwriters are going to need BMI and things of that nature, and your business owners are going to need ASCAP. Those kind of they're pretty much predefined. But in your career, what organizations have you used and you feel like has really been a benefit to you?
Well, I was a member of ASCAP with
Okay.
one group, and then I've been a member of BMI with some other groups.
Okay.
And I honestly never received a penny from ASCAP.
Right.
So I still receive money from BMI a couple times a year, and so they've been okay with me. Also, the internet version of the performance rights organizations, right? So these guys, they take care of like if your song plays on the radio, or if it plays in a TV movie soundtrack, or it plays in a restaurant, or it plays on an airline, right? Like let's say the airline is featuring a particular movie this month, and so then you get paid from those performances. But then who was watching what was happening on the internet? So then there came this company called Sound Exchange.
I think I've heard of that. Yeah.
So they were, and a lot of people, they were collecting money on behalf of a lot of people whose songs were playing on the internet, and then you had to sign up for it. And so I signed up for it, and then boom, I got a windfall, and I put a new roof on my house. So
That's a good thing.
yeah, that worked out pretty well.
Well, there a lot of that. The way that it was and the way that it is has definitely taken a change. A lot of performing artists out there right now. Spotify in itself, Pandora. You've got CD Baby, you've got TuneCore, you've got so many of them out there that's all involved in this transaction, world that we live in. So that's why I asked the question about organizations and who do you use or who do you feel like really helps. So, all right.
And then there's my my publishing administrator, which is Universal Music.
Well, that was my next question. So, and I do title this "Cutting Through the Fog." A lot of people, they don't understand. You've got song creation or music creation, and where it goes from there, and where it finally ends up before you can, stick a fork in it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all of the things that happen. The recording, the publishing, the management, the agencies. What have you found, or what do you use? And you was just talking about publishing, so kind of give us what you see as a full picture for you.
Well, I had originally signed a publishing agreement, a writers agreement with Elmo Irving Publishing, which was the publishing version subsidiary of A&M Records.
Okay.
So they were their own standalone entity. So then Elmo Irving was bought up by Universal Music at some point. And then, and lo and behold, when I started talking to Universal Music, it was manned by all the same people that were at Elmo Irving. So, but I was having difficulty getting my publishing, getting paid for my publishing because of my previous group. And they had worded the contract in such a way that I had to go through them to get my publishing. So I had gone to about 10 different law firms to try to ask them to try to straighten these contracts out.
Right.
Another little debacle where a dram of prevention would have been worth more than 100 tons of cure, and no one was able to do it. And so finally, I started reading my contracts and learning what they meant in every given situation.
Right.
And then finally,
not now, but then too. I mean, going in the future, what that could mean to. Yeah.
Right. So not only past, past royalties, but future royalties as well.
Right.
So then I finally approached the same people at Universal Music that I've been talking to for 20 years at Elmo Irving, and I remember telling them, look, if you go to page 6 of my co-publishing agreement, and it says, A, B, and C, and so I can tell you right now that your expectations are not being met. And so at what point do you become an instrument or a co-conspirator of the fraud that's being perpetrated upon me?
Whoa, wow, okay.
And so, boom, that changed everything.
Right.
So they started working with me as far as giving me the information I needed to collect all my past royalties. And then I said, okay, that's great. Now let's move forward in terms of future royalties. We don't want this to happen again. So they said, what do you want us to do? I said, I want you to freeze all of the future royalty statements and royalty holdings. And until such time as everyone agrees that we will be paid directly from the publishing administrator and not through that organization. So
get the middleman out of it.
Right. Get them out of there, and I want to be paid directly through them. So that took another 5 years to get everyone to agree, but after not being paid their royalties for 5 years, everyone finally saw the writing on the wall and said, we're never going to get paid for this again until we sign these papers. So, and there were several writers on all of this. Even some of them were deceased.
But it took an attorney to get it a final.
It took me to do it.
Took you? Oh,
took me to do it. I went to many attorneys, and they either couldn't or wouldn't do what I wanted them to do.
So you drew the line in the sand.
So I was the one that had to take the bull by the horns and say, nothing's going to happen until it happens this way. And it took 25 years to make that happen. But I just wouldn't give up. And wouldn't give up, and I finally made it happen.
That's a heck of a story, Gary. Wow, that's something really to go through there. And the good Lord blessed you with the fortitude to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to have to do it again. I don't have another 25 years.
All right, well, let's move on to the next question. And I know this, like I said, this is kind of looking ahead and where you're at in your music walk, but media and marketing strategies. What do you see going ahead for you, or where are you at with the whole spin on things these days?
As you know, the industry is evolving faster than I think anyone ever imagined that it would. Like, I believe it was one way, right? For a very long time. So if you want to go back to when Bing Crosby and Tin Pan Alley and right up until like Elvis Presley, it was kind of one way, where they would have these professional writers. This was the business model. Right. They have these professional writers, and then they'd have these performers, and they would match up the songs to the performers, right? And then try to have a hit. So Frank Sinatra or Bing Crosby or whoever you want to talk about, that's kind of the way it went. Then all of a sudden, the Beatles showed up, and you had Little Richard show up, and you had the Rolling Stones show up, and people who were writing their own material. So they didn't really need these professional writers anymore. So there was a
transition.
There was a huge transition, from one business model to the next one. So it remained there for a very long time, and then and so right up and through like my time in the 80s and into the 90s, then all of a sudden the internet showed up, right? So then you had digital file sharing, and so all of a sudden people weren't buying records anymore. Then Napster, right? The whole Napster thing, and all this digital file sharing, and so publishing is the publishing revenue is a portion of the suggested manufacturer's retail list price, right? So it's a portion of that.
Right.
So if people aren't buying records, the publishing isn't coming in anymore either. Right. So you had all these entertainers sitting on the couch, earning their royalties and living well. And then all of a sudden, nobody's buying records anymore, and the checks stop coming in. So then everybody had to get off the couch and try to put some group back together and get out there on the road and try to get some money coming in again. So then there was all of this upheaval in the industry. And then, of course, when the internet came along, then artists realized that they didn't have to go into a big, expensive studio. They didn't need, $100,000 or $250,000 to go make a record. Mm-hmm. They could buy the digital recording equipment.
Get your computer and get your DAW and get yourself a place that you can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, as it turns out, you didn't really need a big label anymore either. No, you could do that by yourself. You just needed a distribution deal. And there are some people who do that by themselves too. There's a woman in upstate New York, and I want to say she's from Rochester or Buffalo. Her name is Annie DeFranco. And she's everything. Like, she's the artist, she's the writer, she's the producer, she's the engineer, the label, the marketing, she's everything. She does the whole 9 yards. She's her own tour manager or whatever. She puts out her records and she fulfills she does, order fulfillment. She's a one-woman operation. Right. So she proved that you don't need anybody. You can do it all yourself.
There's a name for that. Indie.
Yeah, right.
I mean, pretty much. It's not exactly, indie can be a music style, but that independent artist, that person that's out there doing all of that. So, yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I'm one of those. That's everything I do. The albums that I have produced, all the things that the media marketing, the connection to all of the social platforms, all of that. I've learned those. I'm still learning a lot of that, but I'd like to mention, as an honorable mention, I was watching a video today. And it's ironic because I was watching a guy. Have you ever heard a guy by the name of Rick Beato?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I know who he is.
Okay. Well, Rick Beato was doing a YouTube video, and he was having this very same conversation that you and I are having right now, and explaining a lot of it. And so you can tell that the bridges, if you've crossed and Rick's crossed at the same time, they're the same stories. So excellent reference, buddy. Excellent reference.
He's got some great videos out there.
All right. You kind of answered my what are the changes in the industry. And where we see things going. And of course, a lot of it's open for interpretation.
Yeah, I don't know where everything's going, to be honest with you, and I don't know anybody who does.
Well,
we're all just giving it our best guess.
It's not. In some regards, it's not a happy story. In some regards, we don't really know. There's liable to be something comes out of all of this that But when you're talking about and the buzz. In the world right now is AI, the musical production and things through the artificial intelligence. There's so many of them out there. I'm not even going to start naming them.
Chat GPT or whatever.
There's just so many of them that there's a lot of that where does the influences come from, and that's just. So yeah, it's going to might get crazy, and we might see some beautiful things. We're just going to have to. I guess we're along for the ride, as long as we're on the horse, right?
Right.
All right. So, as a performer, what do you feel like that you do that really works for you? What are the things that you really just lock your teeth into as a performer?
Actually, there's probably several things that I could say there. I have to address the substance abuse topic.
Okay.
Because I early on, understood that I was a person who was not subject to substance abuse, but I was trying to function in an industry where you're totally surrounded by it.
Right.
So there was a period of somewhere between 15 and 20 years where I was offered free drugs all day, every day. And of course, it's not
just
like...
a buffet, huh?
Yeah, right. And so it's not like you can say, oh, hey, thanks a lot, and you take it with you, and, I'll catch you next time, right? No, they want you to do the drugs right in front of them.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
It's a social thing.
Wow.
And so, I wasn't going to do it. I just...
Bless your heart.
Right? So I couldn't do it. I never did do it. And so I never got into excessive drinking. I never got into, any kind of drugs like cocaine and pot and cigarette smoking and none of that. I never did any of this stuff. And so in the beginning, of course, when people are coming at you and they got coke and they got Quaaludes and there was heroin and there's angel dust and just everything they're coming at you with, pills, and you have to choose, between whether you're going to stick with your convictions or you're going to fold up like a tent.
Right.
And so I always had to say no. I won't do it, and it was always a matter of like trying to find the most diplomatic way to say it, because when you tell somebody that you don't want their drugs, they're under the impression that they're offering you something of tremendous value. So a lot of times they can be very insulted, right? Because it's like you just told them that their kid is ugly or that their gift isn't good enough, right?
Right.
And the idea that their commodity does not appeal to you is just something that they don't understand. If they did, then they probably wouldn't be offering it to you, or they wouldn't be doing it themselves. So
that's a lot of strength right there, brother. That's a lot of strength.
Quickly become ostracized, if you start telling people no. It's like, well,
but there's integrity,
Yeah, but we're talking about the entertainment industry, right? There's very little integrity in the entertainment industry. So that was one area that I stuck to my guns. I never backed down, and I never got involved in any of that stuff.
If it means anything at all, I'm very proud that you're sitting here telling me this story.
Well, and it wasn't like I fell on my sword or anything. When people would be offering me drugs, as much as I appreciated the gesture, it was like they were offering me a handful of hornets. They would offer me drugs, and I'd be like, "Oh no!" It just, it didn't appeal to me. And then in the end, like a lot of my friends did, and some of them are no longer with us. A lot of them are no longer with us.
Well, that's poison, man. It ain't nothing but poison in your system.
Yeah. So I just never got involved. Now I've been doing that for long enough to where they don't offer it to me anymore because they already know what the answer is, right?
I'll take his.
Yeah, it's like
somebody around you.
Yeah, go ahead and have what, give it to that guy.
Yeah, so I'm saying, there's somebody going to say,
he'd love it, right? I have no use for it.
Bless your heart, man. Like I said, I'm proud that you're here telling me that right now. That's good for you.
And so then my kids, and particularly my younger son, when he was going to school, I was, the wilder parent, of all of the parents, of his friends in school, of him and all of his friends. I was like the wild, they saw the hair and, the crazy things I said and did and all that, and I didn't care. I'm not here to impress anybody or conform in any way, shape, or form. And so I was pretty wild, and I had a reputation. So his friends would say, "I'll bet your dad knows where to get all the righteous drugs."
Oh,
right. And
man.
Can you ask your dad, if he's got some pot or whatever? And my son would say, well, he doesn't do any drugs. And I'm like, "You liar!" I'm like, "Really? No, he doesn't. He never did. I never did, and I never will."
Bless your heart.
I don't even fill prescriptions. When my doctors, if I see a doctor for some ailment, something's hurting or whatever, and they write me a prescription, and I look at it, and I'm like, I just give it back to them. Like, I'm never going to fill that.
Okay. Wow. That's a heck of a story, man. But like I said, bless you.
I mean, not to get into pharmaceuticals, but there are 275,000 pharmaceutical products, and not one of them is a cure for anything.
No.
Right? So what does that tell you?
They're there to hook you, but that's going to be a different podcast for a different day. So let's move on to the next question. What plans do you have for the future? Where are you headed with all of this, or where would you like to be with all of this?
I've accumulated. I mean, really, I'm at the top of my game at my age, and which is not a lot. Is not a lot of my contemporaries can say that. I've taken care of my health. What I eat, what I drink, how I sleep, whatever, and what I don't do, things I do and don't do. have allowed me to continue to do this a lot longer than a lot of my contemporaries who are barely hanging on by a thread.
Right.
I mean, the ones that are still alive got one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. So I feel like I'm really blessed, at my age to be able to do this at a high level. I would love to do it at a high level. I just don't have those ins right now. Do I know a lot of successful musicians? Yes. But one, Edward Van Halen said to me one time, musicians are the last people who can or will help you. And he's right. So if you want to get further in the industry, there's a number of people that can help you. And typically they're like producers or the co-writers or guys who run like high-level studios, or it might be a photographer.
Right.
Who does
right.
High-level people.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point.
So
because
I don't know where I'm going with it, but I would love to be in a pro situation with people who want to work. People who want to have who want to put out a superior, unique, marketable product.
Yeah.
And you can't phone it in. You have to be willing to do the work.
Value. You want to put some value out there.
Right. And there was a time when I first moved to Texas, and because I have a group in California that I work with, and we just do corporate events and private parties, and we make way more money. I fly in to these shows.
Yeah.
And I've been commuting to work with that band from day one. I've been with them for 8 years now. Huh. And so I was commuting from LA.
What's the name of the band?
Mr. Rude.
Okay.
And I actually replaced the, there was a drummer before me, a guy named Ronnie, who was a great guy, and I love him to death. But the drummer before him was the Simon Wright, who was the drummer in AC/DC.
Okay.
So after AC/DC, he played in Mr. Rude, and then after Mr. Rude, he left Mr. Rude to go play with Dio, Ronnie Dio. So so then I came in, and so band has evolved. They've been around for well over 30 years.
You played with Dokken and...
yeah, I first toured in Europe with Dokken in 1980.
Okay, and then who's some of the other bands that you've been playing with?
I played with a group called Sister that later became Wasp. Then before they became Wasp, I left that group because I really could not get along with the singer. And there was a guy in England who was writing a book about Wasp, and he contacted me, and I'm still like Facebook friends with that guy. Okay. And so he put out a book called Wasp: Sting of the Tail. So I'm in that book, and I do have some complimentary things to say about the singer because he's a very good businessman, but he's not a...
He wasn't a people person.
No, okay. No, he's an anti-people person. All right. So there was that, and then I joined a band called Dante Fox, which later became Great White, and then after that, I joined a band called Romeo that became Britain, and we wrote 600 songs. We recorded 100 of them, and then we put out one album. And I still get paid from that album because half of those songs ended up on movie and TV soundtracks. Yeah. Pretty happy with those. And then I think after that I became a lead singer. So I was the guy up front. I was the front man. I didn't play drums in that band. And that was a band called Skin on Skin. And then my bass player left and joined Ozzy Osbourne. And then he was with Ozzy for 4 years, and then he's been with Alice in Chains now for like 27 years, something like that. So
some big names.
Yep.
Big names. Well, as a performer, where are you going to surface next? Where can folks see you, or I mean, what kind of schedule you got?
I'll be performing in church a week from Sunday.
Yes, you will.
There's another band coming in this coming Sunday, so I won't be there this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday. But I was, when I first came to Texas, and I don't know if this is a Houston thing, but I was trying to put a group together, and so I was out meeting as many musicians as I possibly could, and I noticed this one thing. So I was trying to put a group together like Mr. Rude, so we could just do corporate events and private parties and get the big cash.
Right.
And so I was offering people, individual musicians, $500 a show. And everybody was on board until I used the R word. So when I said rehearse, they're like, oh yeah, no.
No, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't do that. So they said, just give me the set list.
Or the P word, practice.
Right.
Okay.
So just give me the set list and $100 and I'll show up and I'll, do the night and that's it. I'm like, hold on a second. You're willing to take an 80% pay cut just so that you can not do any work and then turn in a generic version of the song? I'm like, my name's going on this, and so no, it doesn't work like that. There are things to be worked out. There are intros, there are segues,
Yes.
there are
Yes.
extended endings, there's background harmonies, there's outros. There's a multitude of things to work on. And I'm not going to, allow you to take an 80% pay cut just so you can turn in a generic version of the song. That's not how you make a name or you build something. That's not a product worth marketing.
Well, it's funny that we're having this conversation that way right now because as I may have told you that I'm kind of in that market right now, and I'm kind of curious as to see how this is going to work out because I'm looking for the right people, and the right people being just like you're saying, they're people that are willing to put in that time and become a cohesive group. Because if you're going to put your name on something, it needs to feel right, be right, and it's something that you can trust and you can put it in front of other people that they can trust. And so I'm totally with you on that. So,
and it occurred to me that after every single person I spoke to said the exact same thing, and then I actually had some guy say, yeah, you're never going to get people to rehearse. I've been trying to get people to rehearse for 25 years, and if I couldn't do it, you're not going to do it. And I thought, is that why I've never heard of a famous band from Houston?
Maybe so.
I don't know. I mean, that doesn't mean that there aren't famous artists, because you will find individual people that, are willing to work hard. But as far as like putting a band together, you're talking about trying to find a fly turd in a pile of pepper. When you're trying to find a whole group of people, I couldn't even find one person that was willing to work.
And then you add on the condition or the feeling, maybe we'll call it that not everybody that you play music with feels cohesive. You've got to find that part of you and that person where it comes together and you go, oh man, that is perfect.
That's a great point, because when we were young, the criteria really was like, you really just wanted to find people who could play their instrument, right, and wanted to make the same kind of music you wanted to make,
right,
and then hopefully they look good too,
right,
and that they were good on stage.
Yeah.
That was it. If you could find that, then you were golden. Now it's like you throw. There's a lot of politics, involved in it now. Like in the last few years, there have been some criteria. No, that's not the word I want to use. There's been some issues that have been thrown into society that have drawn lines, in between people, right? So it's like, whereas I would have been willing to work with that person, or that person would have been willing to work with me.
And it could come from seeing a different post on social media, like
it could, yeah,
right, yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's like I realize I'm never going to be able to work with that person because of the way they think, and they're not going to be able to work with me.
Exactly what I'm saying.
So as if it wasn't hard enough to put a band together already, now you got that going on.
Now you got to like their dog too, huh?
Right.
Well, Gary, if people are looking to find you, where can they find you or contact you at? So what resources do you have there?
I have a website. It's drumsvocals.com.
Okay.
drumsvocals.com.
All right.
And if you look through there, you'll find, I think there's buttons to my Instagram, my YouTube.
Got all the links in there?
Yeah, the links should be in there, okay. But there's a contact button. So if you hit the contact button, you can literally send me an email.
Okay.
And I'll get it.
All right.
So, But
And you have a YouTube channel too.
I do have a
right?
YouTube channel.
Okay.
It's Time Management Inc.
All right.
TIMEMGTINC.
Because you're a drummer and
Because a
you're
drummer
managing.
and
Okay.
drummers manage time.
Okay. All right. Good enough. Well, here's the last question, the most important one. What is your advice to anyone wanting to be in this industry or getting started?
Stay true to yourself. Don't allow don't allow anyone to compromise your integrity, your convictions, and your character. In the end, you have to look yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's maybe why some people, including me, didn't get further than I might have. But if you really,
You don't have to go down to the crossroads.
yeah, you might find yourself in a position where you have to do something awful to somebody who doesn't deserve it.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not. It's just not within me to do that. It never was.
Okay. Well, Gary, I want to thank you for coming in for the podcast today. It's been a pleasure and a great opportunity to hear your story. And, I say this at every podcast, and I mean it this way. I want you to know that I want everybody around you to know how blessed they are to have you in their life. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
For what you do and who you are and how you are. So,
I would just love to find a position where I can contribute, right? Because I've learned a lot over the course of my life.
I bet we don't slow you down a bit, buddy. I bet you'll find that, and there are probably a lot of conversations you and I can have about that, off camera and talk about a few things in those regards. Because I think my heart's kind of, in the same spot. What we're talking about, that contribution aspect of everything. So, I do say and believe that possibilities are endless. Your thoughts do become your reality, as we've discussed here today. And just don't worry about the things you can't control. Now, listen, I don't put the like and subscribe up front. I've said this in other podcasts, and I'll continue to say this. This is the spot I put it. But here's what we need. If you're going to help out musicians, if you're going to help out this industry, if you're going to be part of this industry, then you've got to link arms at some point. And the way to do that, to help out right now, is to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and get the notification bell working for you. If you're following Gary, you're following the podcast, you're following me, whatever that, gets you here, we want to keep you here, and we want to keep this moving on. There's going to be many, 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 many interviews that we will be doing in here, and everybody comes in. If you didn't pick up something out of Gary's story, then you weren't listening at all. There was a lot of, you've heard me say this before, diamonds, the diamonds that we pulled out of this podcast. So, once again, my brother, I appreciate you being here, and you guys get out there and subscribe and help us out. Pass the word, share what we got going on, okay? And as far as I know, this podcast is a wrap, unless there's anything else you want to share. We're good?
We're good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. Y'all be good out there, and y'all watch for the next podcast, and stay safe. God bless you. Bye.